Oh, heaven knows, yes, yes. There were lives at stake, lives which were just like sand disappearing through our hands day after day. We've got 10,000 today, 12,000 tomorrow. And if you don't do something today, then tomorrow there will be more. If you don't do something this week, then next week will be more. There's no end in sight at the time. No end in sight.
But it still wasn't too late. Hundreds of thousands of Tutsis had somehow survived. 8,000 had taken refuge at the Catholic seminary of Kabgai. But such havens were becoming little more than concentration camps. The victims made desperate pleas to an indifferent world.
They're attacking us. It's unbelievable. They come in here and take the old and the young out of the camp and kill them using knives and machetes. It defies imagination, and there's nothing we can do.
Then, suddenly, the UN seemed to have a change of heart.
Mr. President, the cries of the victims in Rwanda have been heard calling upon the Security Council to act. The sheer magnitude of the humanitarian disaster in that tragic country demands action.
Now saying it was deeply affected by the tragedy, the Security Council voted to increase its force in Rwanda to over 5,000 men, with a clear mandate to protect civilians.
The priority now must be to ensure the early deployment of the troops needed for these tasks.
But the Security Council did not set a timetable for deploying the new troops, and some insiders believed it was all a sham.
When the Security Council voted for a stronger UNAMIR, what did you think was actually going to happen?
Nothing was going to happen. Nothing was, and that's what happened.
Nothing.
Nothing.
Because?
Because this was a document that looked great on paper, but didn't have really much of a chance of ever being implemented. Because fundamentally, member states weren't going to provide the resources to carry out that plan.
If a new UNAMIR mission were to save lives, it would need more armored personnel carriers, or APCs. The UN had only 5 in Rwanda, not nearly enough to get troops around the country safely. The White House promised to lease UNAMIR 50 more, but the U.S. military, which had the job of delivering them, was still afraid of being dragged into a conflict it could not control, and seemed to seize any opportunity for delay.
It became almost a joke as to the length of time and the ever-emerging details of things that had to be decided in order to get the bloody APCs on their way. They got all bogged down into issues of the exact terms of a lease, what color, who would paint them where, what color, what kind of stenciling would go on, and all of the other little details.
I mean, were people aware that while this was going on, people were dying?
Oh, sure. Of course.
And?
And? Well, where were the Belgians? I didn't see the British Gurkha battalions either. Where was everybody? Everybody was hiding.
The Americans finally delivered the APCs, but only to neighboring Uganda, where they stayed until the killing was over. Meanwhile, the Clinton administration was still playing word games.
We have every reason to believe that acts of genocide have occurred.
How many acts of genocide does it take to make genocide?
Alan, that's just not a question that I'm in a position to answer.
It's true that that you have specific guidance not to use the word genocide in isolation, but always to preface it with this word acts of.
I have guidance which I try to use as best as I can. I'm not. I have. There are formulations that we are using that we are trying to be consistent in our use of. I don't have an absolute categorical prescription against something, but I have the definitions, I have phraseology which has been carefully examined and arrived at as best to...
In mid-July, the Tutsi-led guerrillas finally won the war. The killers were defeated. The Hutu genocide was over. With their hoes and machetes, the extremists had killed 5 times faster than the Nazis. An estimated 800,000 people had been murdered in 100 days. Four years later, President Clinton made his pilgrimage of contrition to Rwanda.
I have come today to pay the respects of my nation to all who suffered and all who perished in the Rwandan genocide. We did not act quickly enough after the killing began. We should not have allowed...
In his speech, the president would use the word genocide 11 times.
We did not immediately call these crimes by their rightful name, genocide.
It was meaningless. It was hollow. It was unclear to me what he was apologizing for and for whom he was apologizing. He didn't say, I take personal responsibility for the failure of the United States and the international community to do something to stop genocide. He made, as I recall, some kind of vague reference to the failure of the international community to act and to help the Rwandans in their hour of need.
It may seem strange to you here, especially the many of you who lost members of your family, but all over the world, there were people like me sitting in offices day after day after day who did not fully appreciate the depth and the speed with which you were being engulfed by this unimaginable terror.
Well, I'd say responsibility starts at the top. And I know the president went to Rwanda and apologized and said he didn't really understand because he wasn't properly informed. This is not true. And as they were informed, they were adequately informed.
Before his speech to government officials, President Clinton had a private audience with a few survivors of the genocide and listened silently to their horrifying stories.